You may know this man. His name is Nelson Mandela. You may also believe you know his story. He was a prominent South African activist who was imprisoned for his efforts to end the apartheid. Sentenced to life, Mandela died in prison in the 1980s. Right? Actually, no. While the first part is true, including that he was sentenced to life in prison, he did not die there. After 27 years, he was released, at which point he went on to help end the apartheid and become the first president of South Africa, serving from 1994 to 1999. He didn't die until much later, in 2013, from a respiratory infection. Strangely though, many people incorrectly remember his death the first way. This phenomenon of collective false memory has been coined the Mandela effect, and has been observed in numerous other situations. But what is the explanation behind this? How can it be that so many different people remember the same thing, even though it never happened? The reason for the Mandela effect likely lies in basic psychology of memory. When we remember something, we tend to just remember the general idea of it. It's not stored in our brains in picture-perfect detail. So, when something is retold, various specifics are often forgotten or altered, usually in a way that seems to make more sense. Take these pictures of Pikachu, for example. Which would you say is the correct image? If you said this one, you'd be wrong. His tail doesn't have this black spot at the end. However, your brain probably thinks that it should, since it fits with the trend of his black-tipped ears. Other examples of the Mandela effect are seemingly the result of confusing one thing for another. Someone may be remembering something that they really did see or that really did happen, but they are just associating it with the wrong thing. In the case of Nelson Mandela, it is possible that some people confuse his story with that of Steve Biko, who was also a prominent, imprisoned South African anti-apartheid activist. When Mandela made it out of prison, Biko did not. He died there, and so it may be the case that his death is being attributed to Mandela. Also potentially responsible for the Mandela effect is the external stimulus someone may receive when being asked a question about a memory. For example, the specific wording of the question may indicate the superiority of a particular answer, making it surprisingly easy for someone to think that said answer is correct. The question, Curious George has a tail, right? Is asked as if the person knows that Curious George has a tail, but is just checking to make sure. So if the receiver of this question is not fully confident in their knowledge of Curious George, this subtle demonstration of confidence may make them believe that this is the real image of the character, even though this tailless version is the real thing. To give greater explanation to the fact that the Mandela effect is a phenomenon that affects people collectively, we can turn to our brain's struggle to distinguish between what is familiar and what is true. A false belief can easily spread to more and more people because they become used to hearing it that way, and that feeling of recognizing something as being known to them feels the same as recognizing something as being correct. Today, with the internet, which can familiarize millions of people with the same ideas, this is easier than ever. Something important to note about many examples of the Mandela effect is that they are often things that we remember from a long time ago. Taking Looney Tunes as an example, not only did the show come out in 1930, meaning it's not something most people are very familiar with today, but it's also more of a children's show, so it's something we recall from many years back, during our earlier years, meaning many details have blurred in our minds. While these are the many possibilities that could explain the Mandela effect, there is still no clear, universal answer to the question of why so many of us have the same false memories. But in the past few years, scientific studies have begun to examine the phenomenon. In 2022, in the first scientific study of the Mandela effect, researchers at the University of Chicago looked into visual examples of the effect. As a result, they were able to confirm the legitimacy of the effect, that people really were having consistent, confident, and widespread false memories of famous icons. Even when people were reportedly familiar with the icons, they still made the same mistakes as the other participants. The researchers also found that the effect is not limited to circumstances when we are presented with images and made to choose between them. Even when participants were asked to make pictures of the icons themselves, they still tended to make the same mistakes. Another achievement of the study was ruling out various explanations as being universal causes. It isn't simply that we aren't looking carefully at the images. People still make the wrong choice even when looking at the altered part of the picture. It also isn't always the case that we misremember because the incorrect option seems more logical. Taking the Fruit of the Loom logo as an example, many people falsely believe that it contains a cornucopia, despite this not exactly being the obvious choice. In fact, it seems quite bizarre considering it's not an object that we usually see. Even when presented with more logical options like a plate, they still made the wrong choice. Finally, and perhaps most interestingly, the researchers were also able to use this study to support the fact that there seems to be consistency in the types of things that people do and don't remember. Some images seem to just contain qualities that make them inherently less memorable. Not only that, but other images seem to have a special ability to induce false memories. As fascinating as this is, though, further research must be done in order for us to fully understand it. The same goes for the Mandela effect itself. We'll just have to stay tuned in as scientists continue their research investigating the inner workings of human memory.